Hi, everybody. I'm just going to be talking a little bit about the graphic novel Batman: A Death in the Family and a couple things that I thought about it. So, to start us off, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what I thought about Jason Todd, just kind of in the beginning of the graphic novel, prior to the climax with the explosion in Lebanon. So, when we're first introduced to Jason Todd as, the new Robin, Batman's sidekick, I think it's easy to draw a lot of, similarities and comparisons between Batman and his sidekick because, they're kind of running the same gig together. Um, I think, Batman has this very, uh, emotionally devoid way of going about his business where it's very methodical and logical in that he takes care great care in his actions and what he does. And I think there's some moments early on where, one of the first scenes where they have those criminals basically surrounded in the warehouse, and Batman is calling in for the police, the backup. And Robin just, I think, has a little bit of a emotional slip up where he kind of shows his immaturity a little bit and jumps the gun and goes ahead and attacks all of them. And at the end of the day, it does work out. But I think this is kind of the key point I'm trying to make with Jason Todd in the early parts of the novel is that he's this very immature, kind of emotionally unstable kid. That makes it sound like he's not very, mature at all. I mean, he is only, I think, 14 at the time, but right around there. Um, but very similar to Batman and how he lost both of his parents. Jason Todd also lost his parents, but he hasn't come to to terms with it yet. He hasn't had any true closure with it, and I think this is very apparent in just how he was brought up and his upbringing. So, he didn't have any support, both financially, emotionally, or any external means to deal with some of the trauma and emotional hardships with regards to losing his parents. And early on, before Batman finds Jason Todd, we see that he's not a criminal, but he's not on the right side of the law all the time and is often just resorting to, the bare minimum and getting by on an everyday basis. And, early on, after that, when Jason Todd kind of has his emotional fight with Batman, kind of walks off, runs off, and he finds the pictures of his parents and his birth certificate, and he realizes that his mom that he thought was his mom, it wasn't actually his real biological birth mother. And it sparks this understandable desire to find his real mother. And then you have the whole inquiry part where he's using his detective skills he's learned being Batman's sidekick to go find his mother, which leads him to the Middle East, where he unfortunately gets caught up in the Joker's activities, who just happens to be dealing with his biological mother, as we learn a little bit later in the graphic novel. So I think with regards to what I thought about Jason Todd, kind of during the explosion, we know that he tried to save his mother even after he saw that she was in collaboration with the Joker, and I think that does speak to a little bit of his Jason's character, as a human. That at the end of the day, it doesn't matter that his family might have done something wrong. He still loves them and is willing to quite literally put his life on the line to attempt to save them. So I think that's probably the biggest thing I thought about Jason Todd was, he might have been very emotionally immature and, at the beginning and throughout it, but he was a loving person who quite literally would sacrifice himself for somebody that he has only known for, a very, very short amount of time in his life. So I think that speaks to him and some of the qualities that Batman might have instilled in him. But with regards to the plot of the actual graphic novel and, how I voted for if Robin should live or die, I still think that the way the graphic novel went was the right way, and that's reflected in my vote. I don't think that Robin should have lived. I think just logically, coming out of a massive explosion like that in such a short distance doesn't make the most sense logically. But I think just for some of the character development points with regards to Batman, I think it's important that Robin doesn't make it out of that explosion, and I think it has a lot of importance for Batman and what I made of him in the aftermath of the incident and kind of some of the changes in him. So, like I mentioned earlier, I think Batman's very methodical and logical and kind of devoid of emotion in a lot of these situations. But I think following the death of Jason, he was much more emotional. I think we saw a lot more of the human aspects of Batman and, just how he acted and, the justice that he sought to invoke. And I thought it was very, I guess, relatable, honestly. That this superhero has a human quality to him. We know he is a human, but a lot of the time it can be kind of out of touch. Trying to relate to the Batman. But I thought that was interesting, and how far he would try to go for Jason, and just trying to balance that with this huge problem for him that the Joker technically has this diplomatic immunity, which is quite hilarious and ironic in my opinion that this massive well-known criminal gets diplomatic immunity and he can't do anything about it. But regardless of that, I think we saw Batman punch Superman, which is just dumb if we're being honest with each other. We saw he broke some of his knuckles. But yeah, I think following the incident, Batman, I think probably was a lot. The biggest change I saw was that he was a lot more, I think, emotional, and that he was more understanding and raising, I think, a Robin in a manner that treats them as a kid, not just as a partner. And I think that that's probably the biggest thing. So overall, if I had to evaluate the graphic novel, I'd give it a solid 8.5 out of 10. I really did enjoy it, and I did enjoy that it was a lot, not necessarily more graphic or gory, but it didn't sugarcoat anything, and I think that made it a lot more enjoyable from a reading perspective. So, thanks for listening.